Ibec is your organisation. It is the largest business organisation in the country, and along with the Small Firms Association, covers over 70% of the private sector employment, 1.2 million people. In this room alone this morning, there's over 100,000 employees represented by the CEOs who are here. So it's a significant block of our economy, and a crucial one, as Leo pointed out, to have a collaborative approach. I'm specifically going to focus in on our delivering the jobs agenda, and particularly for the first 100 days of government. But I think it would be remiss not to talk about something that's an incredible challenge to all of us and working collectively, and to make an offer again, which we've done in recent times, around the corporation tax rate. This is a very serious issue that is affecting the confidence of our members, not just in their business, but also in the environment in which when they deal in an international context. Ibec have been in the vanguard in Europe on this, leading the charge, particularly around the triple CTB, the common tax base, which may be the forerunner into that harmonisation agenda. And again, I think we put our resources at the disposal of all the political parties in a united front on that, because we genuinely believe that this is bad for Europe. It's an agenda in which we can drive that on.
But now we'll go now on, I think, to our next question, which is from Julia O'Neill of Gilead Sciences.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about corporate and personal tax. So Gary spoke about the international reputation. Internationally, we are being seriously impacted by the debate that has been ongoing with regards to Ireland's corporation tax rate and the changes that could potentially accrue to that rate as a result of the EU-IMF deal. How will you, in the first 100 days of government, defend Ireland's rate, provide the certainty and confidence to not only multinational companies but to our indigenous SMEs who are heavily leveraged also on the multinational sector? And how will you ensure that we maintain our corporation tax base so that we can provide certainty to the MNC sector?
Danny heard me speak about this yesterday morning at an ACCA function. The politics of tax in Europe is very clear. At the present moment, we're in the front line because we seem to be the bold boys with a very low, an unfair competitive tax advantage. And when you tell some of the people, look, this goes back 40 years. At one stage, there was no corporation tax on manufacturing exports abroad. And you tell the story, we had a 40% corporation tax and a 10% corporation tax when I went into finance in 1994. And that was brought down ultimately to the 12.5 tax rate, which we initiated in the Rainbow government, of which Fianna Fáil completed over the period of time that it was introduced. There are, across Europe, designer taxes. You can walk in as Company X, and if you're pretty attractive, and say, well, I'm going to locate in Germany, and as Peter Brennan can tell you, having his experience there, well, if you go to Saxony, you'll deal with the local Saxony government, former East Germany, and they'll do a deal for you that is particular to your company. Now, we don't have that. And there's a way in which we're holding the line in a very transparent, open and honest system that is not negotiable. Other countries in Europe have a very similar attitude to the sovereignty of their tax. It's a macroeconomic instrument. In fact, it's one of the few that we have under sovereign control, having shared our currency and shared our interest rates and shared our exchange rate, and effectively. And countries like Austria, like Luxembourg, like quite a number of others, particularly our neighbours across the water, are not going to cede control over this space. There's a lot of rhetoric and there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. So defending that is critically important, because we are now kind of like a submarine that has surfaced and we're the only craft on the surface of the water, and because there's a lot of negativity around us, partly self-inflicted, we have to be singing very much the same song, all of us, both the embassy staff, your companies, people like myself and Leo and Mary, when we meet journalists and the rest of it, just to be very, very clear and have a single hymn sheet in relation to that. And I believe we will be successful, because we've had a zero tax rate for years in this country on manufacturing, and we didn't get the growth that we subsequently got. It's a function of growth, but it's not and it's critically important at the very present time. but it is not the only one.
I think the corporation tax is seen very much as a sovereign matter. I think, in fairness, all of the three main parties here have always defended it from the beginning. I think the best argument that can be made to Europe is to say that the corporation tax is not just good for Ireland, but it's good for the Eurozone and it's good for the EU. And everybody benefits from it. And that's an argument that we can justifiably put. And when Commissioner Wren was talking about changes in taxation, he was not talking about changes in corporation tax. So it's actually not on the table. There are no proposals at the moment for that harmonisation. But I think the message that what's good for us is good for you, as in Europe, is one that will stand up. And I think you're probably on safe ground with your support, and each of the three parties here is something we would absolutely defend to the nth.
Our manifesto, we've made a commitment to retaining the 12.5% tax rate, and we're not contemplating any increase in that. If we can keep it at 12.5% during this recession, and I take Danny McCoy's point about how it's more the certainty of it than the actual rate, if we can keep it at 12.5% through the course of the worst recession in a generation, that actually does send out a very strong message to investors that if Ireland can stick to this principle during an economic crisis, then they will stick to it in future, or at least so long as the mainstream parties are the mainstream parties in this country. We do have a problem in the euro, and what we have with the euro is essentially a monetary union. We're supposed to be EMU, economic and monetary union. We have a monetary union, we have a single currency, we don't have a single economy. And that's the inherent flaw in the euro. And I think some journalists, people like Paul Tanzi, I remember in particular, warned us of an asymmetric crisis. And this is exactly what's happened. We've had one recession in one part of Europe and a different recession in another part of Europe. And that's really what's at the core and the problem with the euro. So the question that arises for politicians, and it's a generational question now for politicians, is between fission and fusion. Do we allow Europe to break up and the euro to break up, which is fission, or do we have fusion and bring Europe together more? And the preference of me and my party is to have more Europe, and that is going to involve some form of fiscal union. Our budgetary system of doing budgets is going to involve more common employment and welfare rules to allow labour flexibility. Our position within the EPP, which is our European group, is that we should continue to have tax competition. As Rory said, this is actually an advantage in economies to have tax competition between states. One thing that does concern me, though, about tax competition is that other countries are copying our success. Estonia, now in the euro, has a corporation profit tax rate of 10%. They've already undercut us. And Bulgaria, which is not in the euro yet, I think it's 10% or even less than 10%. So we do have to keep an eye to that. If we could force those countries to come up to 12.5%, it might actually be to our advantage, but certainly not to not conceding a situation where we're forced to go up from our rate.